Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Well, today we're going to be having a quick look at the Smith & Wesson 627 Performance Center. And this revolver answers a question that I've probably asked myself once or twice, which is, what's better than having 6 shots of 357 Magnum? Well, 8 shots of 357 Magnum. We're going to go over all the features and details and see how it stacks up as a carry gun. And we're going to get into all that in just a minute. Alright, once again, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and you just haven't had the chance until now, and you like our content, please consider subscribing. You can hit that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of your computer screen there, or if you're on a mobile device, you can just scroll down below the video and hit subscribe that way. It's a real simple thing that helps us out a whole lot, and we really appreciate it. So, Smith & Wesson 627 Performance Center. As an individual that likes revolvers, I'm always pleased to see something, new and different come along. I've got a lot of Smith & Wesson revolvers, and I think that generally they're very good. And I've got other revolvers as well, but I just happen to have picked up more Smiths along the way than anything, I think. And I've heard people, ask the question, why 6 shots pretty much the limit. A lot of people go with 5 or 6, and I'm okay with that too. But it is interesting that they have this offering. And if you're a person that likes to carry a wheel gun, this is something that may interest you. But let's go ahead and start with our usual basics here. And I think that it's important to make this comparison right off the bat because, since this is about carry, this is what I call a full-size revolver. Okay, now I don't typically carry a full-size revolver. Typically, about the biggest thing that I carry in a revolver is something like this little Kimber K6S. And this is a 6-shot 357 Magnum. But as you can see, it's a whole lot smaller. Now, I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just saying that, for me, I try to go with the smallest thing I can, the most defensive capability in the smallest package. And really, even though this is probably my favorite 357 that I carry, I usually end up carrying something even smaller than that. A lot of times I'm in a little 642 Smith, something like this, in 38. Just because I like being able to drop it in my pocket instead of a sticky holster or something like that, and there's no hammer, something safe and easy to conceal. I end up doing that a lot. So even if you're a revolver person, now if you're used to carrying full-size revolvers, this won't mean anything to you because this is not really out of line with most full-size revolvers. So if you're used to carrying those, that's fine. But I always want to stress this because the focus of this channel, of course, is concealed carry, that if you're not used to carrying something this size, then if you're familiar with some of these more carry-oriented revolvers, this will give you a really good perspective once it'll be like to carry this thing around. Because you got to remember, at the end of the day, as cool as the gun may be, you still have to find a holster for it, and you have to be able to wear it on you comfortably, or else it's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you leave it at home. Alright, we're going to jump right into the features here, but before we do, we'll take a moment to thank our friends over at Don's Weaponry for providing us this beautiful example of the Smith & Wesson 627 Performance Center for today's tabletop review. Don's Weaponry is a huge supporter of firearm and safety education, and we can't thank them enough. So, obviously the first thing we always do is make sure that the firearm is safe. You can clearly see that very easily in a revolver, obviously. And as you go along, you've got your high visibility front sight. It's a fixed sight, but I like the fact they have the orange mark on it there. Then you have an adjustable rear sight. Now, this is the Performance Center, so they tend to make these a little bit nicer than just the more basic revolvers. Of course, your cylinder release is right here, very smooth. And of course, there's your big 8-shot cylinder. Smith & Wesson has made this compatible with moon clips, and they also include some moon clips if you like to use those. I personally don't like using moon clips. If I'm going to do something like that, I may as well just have a speed loader, but that's just me. Either way, I typically don't carry extra ammo when I'm trying to carry something small anyway. If I'm carrying a 5 or a 6 shot revolver, that's usually all I'm carrying, because if I've got room to carry more than that, I'm going to carry something with more capacity. But very smooth release there. It's nice. It's finished very well. You can see that it's a nice looking revolver. They've put a lot of effort into the machining and the details on how this is made. Of course, this is double action, single action. I don't typically carry a revolver that has an external hammer when I carry one, unless I'm carrying it outside the waistband. If I'm on my property or something like that, I'll carry a larger gun like this with a hammer. But typically, if I'm carrying concealed, if it's in my pocket and a sticky or something, I don't want a hammer. But of course, double action, single action. So if you want to do that full trigger pull, you can. If you just want to stage the trigger there, get it cocked and have single action shot. It does have a very nice trigger. I think Smiths in general, their revolver triggers are really good. This one feels especially smooth. And of course, they do put a little extra effort into that in the Performance Center models. I like these grips. These grips actually remind me quite a bit of the texturing of the grips that are on a couple of my Kimbers. The pattern's a little bit different, but it feels the same way. And I know a lot of people that'll look at some of those basic wooden grips and not feel like that they're very secure. But the way the texturing plays out on this, it feels really good in your hand. Now, to me, I will say this. The distance between the grip and the back of the trigger guard with that angle is a little close, because this is kind of a 2-finger grip. If you look at it, you've got a larger opening there, but this plays out when you hold it as more of a 2-finger grip, and my knuckle is right up against the trigger guard whenever I'm holding this gun, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the range section. But it's made well. The components fit well together. It's been machined. Obviously, they've taken a lot of time and effort to make this nice. And it's got the basic components that you would, expect in a double action, single action revolver. So it's got everything you need, and I don't see anything on it that you don't need. So when we talk about the range, if you've ever shot a Smith & Wesson revolver, you've got a pretty good idea of how they shoot their triggers. My experience with Smith & Wesson triggers, if it's double action, they load up. They get a little bit heavier toward the end, and they load up, and then you got a pretty good break. And of course, single action, I think that these triggers are really good, very smooth in single action, and I tend to prefer the single action of this revolver over, say, the double action. But that's just me. The one thing you need to keep in mind, of course, this is a 357 Magnum. Okay, now it's a larger frame, and that frame is going to absorb the energy better than a smaller frame will. But if you've got big fingers, if you've got long fingers, big fingers like I do, and you're holding this thing, keep in mind when this thing is firing and the energy is returning back through the weapon, there's a good chance you're going to feel it in your knuckle, because I certainly can. And it's not a deal breaker for something like that, but this is actually the first revolver that I've ever held in my hand that kind of forces me into that position with the grip. It's a really nice gun, but you're going to feel this if you shoot that after a while, and I don't really know any way to change that, because you can't securely hold the gun unless you've got your fingers wrapped all the way around, and when you do, you're on the trigger guard. So that's the one thing that I don't really like I don't tend to carry these larger revolvers anyway, like I say, except when I'm in an open carry situation. But the fact that this space is so small and on the metal, that might be something to think about, because that might be a little uncomfortable. So what's it like to carry the 627 Performance Center? Well, I don't have a holster specifically designed for this gun, but 'cause, it's not something in my arsenal. But I've got plenty of Galco leather holsters for larger revolvers, and of course I could put this right in one, and that's fine. So inside the waistband, it doesn't feel any different than any of my large Ruger revolvers, or another full-size Smith revolver. As far as the weight, they feel about the same. But to me, this is a pretty heavy gun compared to even some other large-side revolvers. And it carries pretty well in the waistband, but it's a lot of bulk. And like I said, if you're used to carrying a full-size revolver, then this probably isn't going to bother you, because a lot of things about this are great. I think the grip overall is fairly narrow, so when it's in the holster, this is what's going to be sticking up. And it's really not bad as far as how this feels against the body when it's in the holster. And the width, the little bit of extra width you get on the cylinder from it being an 8-shot, you can tell that you've got some extra bulk in there, but it's not terrible. So if you're a person that's used to carrying a full-size revolver and you're thinking about the 8-shot 627, I don't think that you'd be unhappy compared to what you're used to carrying. If you're used to carrying a smaller revolver, I can tell you right now, if you're like me and you usually carry something like this, a 642 or even a Kimber, there's lots of smaller revolvers. And once again, we're not talking about whether they're better physically or whether they perform better, but if you're talking about carrying this in a holster all day long on you, there's a huge difference in how much firearm, and that bulk in the holster, after a while, you're going to think about that. So once again, if you're a full-time carrier of a large revolver, this may not mean any issues at all, but if you're used to smaller guns, it's definitely going to be something to think about. Overall impressions of the Smith & Wesson 627 Performance Center. Well, it's a great gun, okay? It shoots well, just like most Smith & Wesson revolvers do, with my experience. The large frame handles the .357 round very well. It's a very good shooting gun. You can be really accurate with this. I think that if you're looking for a good home defense gun, if you're a revolver guy, this is absolutely something that you'd want to look at, because 8 shots of .357, what's not to like? And like I say, it's a good looking and it's a good shooting gun. Like I say, I've got bigger fingers. If you've got skinnier fingers, my probably one chief complaint won't ever even come up with you, because your knuckle may not even get back there. But that is a concern of mine, and I was actually quite surprised, because that is the absolute first gun that I've ever held in my hand that I had that problem. And I've held a lot of guns in my hand. So, it's good shooting, it's well made, and obviously revolvers, from my way of thinking, are extremely reliable. So it hits all the marks that I would typically look at, except for the comfort. It's a bit more firearm than I would carry as a carry gun, just because I don't carry guns this size typically. If I'm dressed in a way to where I can carry something this big, or if I'm on my property where I'm able to do more of what I want and not have to conceal it, well, then I've got all kinds of other options. I'll probably be in semi-auto at that point, carrying an HK USP or something, like that. Something that I love to carry. My small revolvers really exist to solve the problem of me having something on me to defend myself whenever I'm not dressed heavy. And people's priorities are going to be different. And so once again, if you're used to carrying a larger revolver, I think that you'd probably love this. It's a great gun. It's not cheap. Smith is proud of their Performance Center revolvers, so if you shop this around, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's a good firearm. It's well made. And if you're a revolver person, it's certainly something you might want to add to your arsenal. But for home defense or for just regular shooting, protection, situations where you can carry outside the waistband, I think it's great. So overall, it's a really good firearm. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. We certainly appreciate you being with us as always. Of course, we'll be back with another video very, very soon for you. So until that time, everyone, as always, please stay safe and have a great day. Thank you.